Hello, third graders. Today we will be finding equivalent fractions by drawing models and/or using a number line. To remind you, equivalent fractions are fractions that have different numerators and denominators, but name the same part or amount. Let's take a look at what this looks like using fraction bars. In my first fraction bar that you see here, I can see that this fraction bar is divided into three equal parts. 1, 2, 3. I know that this fraction bar is showing me thirds. I can label this first part 1/3, the second part 1/3, and this third part 1/3. Each piece shows me 1/3. If I look at my second fraction bar, I can see that each piece is 1/6. Here's one equal piece, two equal pieces, 3, 4, 5, 6. I know that each piece is 1/6 of the entire fraction bar. I can go ahead and label each piece 1/6. 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6. I'm trying to find equivalent fractions or fractions that are the same but might have a different numerator or a different denominator. So let's take a look. When I look at 1/3, if I want to find a fraction in the sixth that is the same or equivalent to 1/3, I'm going to need to shade the same amount on my fraction bar for sixth. I can carry this line straight down and I can now shade in these 2/6. I know that 1/3 is equivalent to or equal to 2/6. I can also shade in 2/3. Here I have 2/3 shaded in. And if I follow this line down from 2/3, I can now see that instead of 2/6 being equivalent, now I have 4/6. So I can write 2/3 is equivalent or equal to 4/6. You can see here that my denominators are different. I have thirds and I have sixths, but they're the same amount. 2/3 is the same as 4/6. Sometimes students get confused by this because they see that the denominator is different, so they think to themselves, hey, this must not be equal. But that's not always the case. Drawing fraction bars, dividing them into their equal parts, will help you to see if your fractions are equivalent or not. Let's take a look at another example. These fraction bars are already labeled for us. I can see that this first fraction bar is divided into halves. My second fraction bar is divided into fourths. And my third fraction bar is divided into sixths. If I want to find equivalent fractions to 1/2, I'm going to go ahead and I will shade in this first equal piece. I know that this is 1/2. I can follow this line straight down now to find equivalent fractions to 1/2. If I look at my fraction bar divided into fourths, I can see that 2/4 is the same as 1/2. I can write that like this. 1/2 is equivalent or equal to or the same as 2/4. I can also take a look at my sixth to see what is equivalent to 1/2. Again, if I follow this line straight down and I shade going across, I can see that 1/2 is also equivalent to what? Think. How many sixths? You're right, 3/6. I can write that like this. 1/2 is equivalent or equal to 3/6. You know what? I can also compare fourths and sixths. Let's take a look. If I see 2/4 and I want to find my equivalent fraction on my sixth bar, I can follow my line straight down and I can see that 2/4 are also equivalent to 3/6. I can write that just like this. 2/4 is equivalent or equal to 3/6. Now, you can also use number lines to determine if fractions are equal. So we can also use number lines to determine this. Remember that two fractions are equivalent if they are at the same point on a number line. My question says this: use the number lines to write three equivalent fractions. Remember, equivalent means equal to or the same as. In order to do that, first I must determine how each number line is divided. Let me take a look at this first one. I can see that my first number line is divided into 1 equal part, 2 equal parts. So I know this first tick mark, my denominator is going to be 2 because there are 2 equal parts. And this is the first part, so this is going to be 1/2. So I know that this fraction, this number line is 1/2. And I know that this 1 down at the end is the same as 2/2. 2/2 is the same as 1. When I look at my second number line, I'm going to determine how many equal parts there are. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 equal parts, so I know that this number line is divided into fourths. Since this is my first tick mark, I know that this is 1/4. My pen is going to write. I know this is 2/4. I know this is 3/4. And my last tick mark is 4/4. Remember, 4/4 is the same as 1/2. I'm going to look at my last number line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This number line is divided into 8 equal parts. So I know that each tick is 1/8. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. That's a 5. Sorry. 5/8, 6/8, 7/8. And of course, on this number line, 8/8 is the same as 1/2. My question again says use the number lines to write three equivalent fractions. In order to find my equivalent fraction, I'm going to use this 1/2 and I'm going to find equivalent fractions using this number line. Just like I did with my fraction bars, I'm going to follow 1/2 straight down. If I shade across, I can see that 1/2 is equivalent or the same as 2/4. It looks like this. 1/2 is equivalent or the same as 2/4. I can also compare 1/2 with 4/8. It looks like this when I write it. 1/2 is equivalent or equal to 4/8. My question, as you can see though, asks me to use the number line to write three equivalent fractions. I have 2. I need to find one more. I compared 1/2 to each of my numbers. So now I'm going to compare 2/4 with 4/8. On the number line here, you can see that 2/4 is equivalent to or the same as 4/8. So this is what this looks like. I'm going to write it on the right side. 2/4 is equal to or equivalent to 4/8. Look, my denominators are different, but they're the same amount. Don't get confused by that. Please don't be confused. You might also be asked to determine if fractions are equivalent, and they might ask you to draw your own number line. This question says, are 1/4 and 2/8 equivalent fractions? I'm not given a number line, I'm not given a fraction line, so I need to draw something to figure this out. I have some steps over here on the right for you to follow. Step 1 says, draw a number line to represent the first fraction. Well, my first fraction is 1/4, so I'm going to go ahead and draw my number line to represent 1/4. Here is 0 on one side and 1 on the other. And I'm going to divide this number line into 4 equal parts to the best of my ability. I know that this first tick is 1/4. My next tick is 2/4. My third tick is 4/4. And my last line here is 4/4, which is the same as 1 whole. I just drew my first number line. My second step says draw a second number line directly below the first one to represent the second fraction. My second fraction is 2/8. I need to draw my second number line to be exactly the same length as my first one. I will label it 0 and 1, and this time I need to divide it into eighths. To the best of my ability, I need to divide this into 8 equal parts. Since 8 is an even number, I know that I can divide this right in half and then make 4 on one side and 4 on the other, to the best of my ability. I know that this first tick mark is 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and my last line is 8/8, which is the same as 1 whole. I just finished my second line. The last thing says, compare the value of each fraction given. Here I go. I need to find 1/4 and compare it to 2/8. On my first number line, 1/4 is right here. And if I draw a line straight down, I can see that 2/8 is equivalent to 1/4. So the answer to this question is yes. 1/4 is equivalent or equal to 2/8. Now it's your turn to give it a try. Pause the video to answer these 2 questions. The first one says, use the fraction bars below to find 3 equivalent fractions to 1/2. I'm going to give you a clue here. You're given these 4 different fraction bars, but you're only going to use 3 of them. Please find 3 equivalent fractions to 1/2. The next question says, Miss Chistolini says 2/6 and 1/3 are equivalent fractions. Draw 2 number lines to determine if she is correct. Your tutoring teacher will be looking at your paper to see that you have drawn out 2 number lines. One will be divided into sixths. One will be divided into thirds. You will then determine if Miss Chistolini is right and if 2/6 is equivalent to 1/3. Thanks. Have a great night.